Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, May 7th, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about the battleground state of North Carolina, and a state Supreme Court race that has been in the minds of many Democrats and Republicans in the aftermath of the 2024 presidential election as it comes to a close today, as the Republican Judge Jefferson Griffin, the Republican nominee for state Supreme Court here, has decided to concede today, saying he will not appeal the most recent decision from a Trump-appointed district judge that held the Democratic Party up and said that they fairly won the last election. Now, if you haven't been keeping track of what's been happening in North Carolina, back in 2024, the election came and went. And in that election, the Democratic Party lost the presidential ballot as well as many other statewide elections. They won the governorship and a few state House races, but when it came down to the state Supreme Court race, their margin there was extremely narrow. But the margin wasn't narrow enough that we couldn't determine a victor. By the time all the votes had been cast, Allison Riggs, the Democratic incumbent, one of 2 out of the 7 Democratic incumbents in North Carolina, had clearly won the race for state Supreme Court. But Jefferson Griffin, the Republican, decided that he was not going to take this loss easy. Instead, he was going to argue for the throwing out of upwards of 20,000 votes across the state of North Carolina, citing election rules that he wanted to impose in a post-mortem around this election. Not rules that had been imposed beforehand, not rules that had been in place beforehand, but rather wanted to alter and change the rules, eventually changing who was eligible to vote in previous elections, who was eligible to vote in the most recent election, and whose vote was going to count versus not. And so what happened here was that through litigation, Jefferson Griffin was able to substantially halt Allison Riggs being sworn back into her 8-year term in the North Carolina Supreme Court. What he did was exert his influence over the judicial system and decided to halt to a point where it went to judge after judge after judge after board after board after board, every single level until today. Jefferson Griffin, the Republican, has decided to concede. Now, the only reason why Jefferson Griffin was able to come so close to overturning this election result and giving it to the Republican Party was because of how narrow the margin was in the first place. Allison Riggs winning by 0.02%, just a handful of less than 1,000 votes out of 5.5 million cast, set up the perfect circumstance for the Republican Party to, quite frankly, steal this election. But North Carolina is no stranger to close and competitive races, especially on the state Supreme Court level. If you remember back in 2020, Donald Trump defeated Joe Biden in North Carolina by 1.3%. But Cheri Beasley, the Chief Justice at the time and a Democrat, was outpacing Joe Biden. And by the time the election had concluded, Cheri Beasley had lost by an even narrower margin than Jefferson Griffin had in this most recent election. Cheri Beasley across the state had lost by a margin of 401 votes out of 5.5 million cast. It was a massive amount of votes and a narrow margin. Came down to the 1,000th place when it came down to percentages. But the Democrats did not contest that race beyond a standard recount, which a recount was necessary and was conducted in this state Supreme Court race that did not put Jefferson Griffin ahead, that did not give him the victor. So after the recount had been concluded, his next step was to go through the court system to throw out votes from Democratic-leaning areas. And the crazy thing about it was that this wasn't some type of standard procedure. If you actually go through with what the Republican Party had wanted to do, essentially what they took was Democratic strongholds and took the overseas ballots, including military ballots, and decided that they wanted to throw them out for a variety of different reasons. I mean, the list, it was a laundry list of concerns that they had, but it didn't impact the Republican counties. It wasn't an argument made outside of these Democratic strongholds. It was truly unconventional to see the way that the ruling was trying to be dictated by the GOP, that it would only target the counties that Democrats did well in. And on the margins, arguably, Jefferson Griffin, had the court upheld what his party wanted, likely would have been able to take this election that was fairly won by the Democratic Party and give it to the Republicans. But as I said a few days ago, 2 days ago, the Republican judge who was appointed by Donald Trump lost a massive decision, lost a massive court case, enough so that he's saying 5-6 months later, post-election, I'm giving up. It's a concession that arguably should have come in November, maybe December if you're pushing it, in a race as close and tumultuous as that one. But the fact that it tried, time and time again, to be pushed by the North Carolina GOP, to be pushed by Judge Jefferson Griffin across the state multiple times to try to disenfranchise voters is something that truly is remarkable and not in a positive way. The fact remains, Democrats fairly won this North Carolina race, and now the judge is saying it's over. Stop pushing this. Even in the opinion from this Trump-appointed judge said, you don't change the rules of the game after you've played. You don't make this decision after you've lost the election, and said, what about this, right? It's an argument that is as old as time in American politics, arguably. And it's one that time and time again has been defeated, and this time around, justice prevails again and defeats the Republican Party in this state, because it was absolutely, no matter how you cut it, no matter which way you're looking at it, even if you are the most partisan Republican, deep in your heart you know that this was an intentional trying to overturn the election because you want control of the North Carolina Supreme Court. And what that says about motivations, it doesn't really matter. What I'm looking at here is what happened on Election Day versus what happened in the aftermath. And much like the 2020 election, I mean, we were very quick to say here on this channel that we were not going to entertain any ideas that the 2020 election had been stolen or rigged, because it just simply and plainly is untrue, right? Absolutely. Looking at North Carolina, it was a very similar clear-cut case. There was no other way to draw it. But Democrats should be happy today. As much as this shows that litigation and trying to tamper with the justice system and our election system is trying and requires money and requires a lot of resources, at the end of the day, justice prevailed. No matter how you are on the political scale, the right decision was made. And the right decision for Judge Jefferson Griffin was to concede in this race, and concede he now has done 6 months later. But looking at North Carolina, as I said, is no stranger to close and competitive races. Again, a very competitive race back in 2020, but guess what is right around the corner? None other than a North Carolina Supreme Court justice seat, 2026, where Anita Earls, the incumbent Democratic justice, one of 2 Democrats, as I said previously, is running for re-election. Sarah Stevens, a Republican, is also on the ballot in North Carolina. Both of them will face off against each other this upcoming November. Not this November, rather, the next November. It'll be a race that will coincide with many of the House races in North Carolina, that will coincide with the Senate race the Democrats are hoping they can get Governor Roy Cooper to run for. A number of things here happening in North Carolina that Democrats potentially might have an opportunity for the first time in a very long time to do well in these North Carolina elections, to do well in the state Supreme Court race, to hold on to this seat and potentially in 2028 win back control for the Democratic Party. That all started today. If Jefferson Griffin had won this race, if the district judge had sided with the Republican Party, what that would have done was made the Supreme Court races 6-1, which meant that even if Democrats won in 2026, that would already be their one. So you're back to ground zero. In 2028, the amount of seats up are roughly 3. It would have given Democrats the opportunity, in the wildest of circumstances, to win back majority control. But it would not have been easy, and it certainly would not have been something that anyone would have seen as likely that they went 3 for 3 in the races. If they hold on to the 2026 race, what it does in the North Carolina Supreme Court is bring us to a point where you are at, again, 7 total seats, 2 Democrats right now, you hold on to it. That brings Democrats 2 away from the majority, meaning they would only need to win 2 out of the 3 in the next time, which they'd probably win all 3, right? Whichever way they go, they'd probably all vote together. If it's for GOP for one, probably GOP for all, just as it was in 2020, just as we had seen in the past. That's no stranger to Supreme Court justices in North Carolina, the way at which the voters vote, right? It is very rare that you would find someone voting for one type of Republican judge and another type of Democratic judge on the same ballot, especially in large swaths of voters, that it would have made enough of a difference for the ultimate results to be different on a case-by-case basis. But I will say, weirder things have happened in American politics. But again, the pathway to a state Supreme Court majority for Democrats begins now. It begins today, with the circumstances that have been set up because Democrats fairly won the last election in this North Carolina race, against the odds of Donald Trump winning across the state by a larger margin than 2020 and even 2016. It is something that cannot be ignored. And it's something that will make a difference in the future in North Carolina should Democrats eventually get to that majority. And while this election certainly did try and test the buttons and the pressure of democracy in America, democracy and justice prevailed in this race. Democrats fairly won the race. Republicans have now conceded 6 months late. And Democrats will see that their judge in this race will be sworn in for a full 8 years. Allison Riggs will not be up for a very long time. And although she is one of the 2 Democrats in North Carolina's state Supreme Court race, or state Supreme Court composition, there may be many more to come. And as I said, the pathway to the majority began today with today's concession and a massive blow to the GOP, a massive win for the Democratic Party that is just 6 months late. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2026 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.